Hello everyone, I'm Hannah Lloyd.
And I'm Charlotte Gilfillan.
Welcome to our podcast, Women in Wellies.
Each episode we will be inviting a guest to share their stories, experiences and lessons of working and living in rural Scotland.
We want to get to know the real women behind the wellies and share them with you, our listeners. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Women in Wellies. Today we're joined by Alison Milne. Alison, how are you?
I am very well, thank you, Hannah, and thank you very much for asking me to join you.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here. So, Alison, do you want to kick us off by telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I think maybe I might kick off by congratulating the pair of you, actually, in launching this podcast in the first place. Tremendous effort, been great to listen to, and I'm delighted that you asked me as one of your first guests. So
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you.
So, a little bit about me. My life and career very much been shaped by Scottish agriculture. I grew up on our family farm just outside Stirling and started my career with NFU Scotland as regional manager for Orkney, Shetland and Highlands. When I took the job, I'd never been to Orkney and Shetland and didn't quite appreciate the distance that I was going to be covering from Edinburgh. But it was, if I could have picked a job to start my career, then it was absolutely the one. It was fantastic. And during my time with NFU Scotland, I carved out a career path and had a few different jobs. So I was business development manager before latterly being their commercial and operations director. And then I guess after 8 or 9 years, decided that it was time for me to do something different. My husband and I were looking at ways that we could add value, change the viability of the farm for the future. And I decided that at the time was right to come home. So that's what I did. And Dan, my husband, and I looked at various different options. I decided that I wanted to keep my hand in. So with the stakeholder environment and everything that was going on in policy terms in the industry. So I did a little bit of consulting on the side, mainly for the Tenant Farmers Association and a couple of other different people. And in that time, my husband and I decided that we would launch our business, Crafty Maltsters. So him and I are directors of the business. We grow and have done for generations barley on the farm. We decided we wanted to shout a bit louder and really demonstrate in the supply chain how much importance the farmer and the barley has. So we launched Crafty Maltsters, and I'm happy to kind of share a bit about that journey with you later on in the podcast. And alongside that, I also still do my consultancy business. I'm involved in Scottish Rural Leadership Programme and working with a number of different businesses, mostly in the food and drink supply chain and agri supply chain. And I'm also director of Scotland Food and Drink. And I think that's probably enough for right now, but I'm sure more things will come out that I've forgotten about.
Do you ever sit still, Alison? I thought I did a lot of things, but I think you trump me by quite a long way now.
Well, I do sit still occasionally, but the job that I forgot in amongst all of that is that I'm also a mum. And that is a very important job to me. So yeah, the chances of me sitting still with 3 boys in the house are virtually nil.
But it sounds like you've got a lot of different things and strings to your bow there, and a really varied kind of career and experience across the agriculture sector. And I know that I'm looking forward to slightly later in the podcast hearing more about the journey to Crafty Maltsters.
Yeah, it's certainly very varied, but I think I've quite purposefully chosen things that are complementary. So the organisations that I work with, the Rural Leadership Programme, my own farming business and Crafty Maltsters, I've learnt lessons in each of those different areas that I can transfer, which I think is the best part about it. And I love a bit of variation.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key to doing lots of things, isn't it? That if they complement each other, then the crossover is all there. So it doesn't feel like you're doing quite as many things, which I think is really valuable.
Definitely. It's been a juggling act to get to the point where I really feel that the right balance is there. And I think now. It's probably only in the last couple of years that I really feel as if I've got that balance right.
Alison, you were awarded an MBE in 2020, and I'd love to hear the story about being awarded that, because I think when you found out, you thought it was a friend pulling your leg?
I certainly did. The main reason for that was because it was during COVID time, so it came through as an email. And we all get lots of different spam emails from various places. So I was reading this thinking, this is definitely somebody pulling my leg or some sort of spam. The more I read on, the more I thought, no, this actually looks quite official. And then I sort of fell off my chair and I printed off the letter that I'd got and ran outside without my shoes on, looking for Dan. He was in the yard. I can't remember if it was silage or he was doing something. And I'm waving this piece of paper going, Dad, Dad, Dad. And he was ignoring me and saying, just wait, busy. And I'm like, can't wait. So anyway, I ran up, showed him this letter. And I think for a moment he thought possibly it was a joke as well. And then I guess we just hugged each other and it was like, wow, this is real. I'm not quite sure how to take this. So it definitely took a little while for it to settle in and feel real. And more than anything, I just felt incredibly humbled at this point in my career to have that accolade, recognition, whatever you want to call it, was really humbling. So I had to wait for quite a while because of course it was all during COVID. So I think it was actually 2 years before I went to Holyrood, and it was Princess Anne that presented me, who of course is a real stalwart and a fan of the farming industry. So it was really lovely to have that connection, have that discussion, and yeah, we had a lovely family celebratory meal afterwards, which was great.
I mean, that must have been one of your proudest moments, was it?
Yes, definitely. I think it's hard to sometimes separate what goes on in your family life from your career moments. And I mean, obviously the standard answer is that many of these proudest moments come along with your children, and I think there's been quite a few with Crafty Maltsters as well. But yeah, it was lovely to be recognised in that way. And I think more than anything else, I felt as if I was kind of carrying it for all of the other people that had taught me so many things along the way, and all of the other people that had been involved in my journey and why I'd been recognised in that way.
It's very clear from the outset that your family are a huge part of what you do and why you do things. Would you say that your family are kind of your biggest inspiration when it comes to doing what you do?
Definitely. And various members of my family, all for different reasons, inspire me in different ways. You guys have both met my mum, so I think you know she's a pretty incredible lady, and she has inspired me massively. And again, other people in my family for different reasons. And you know, I don't really want to single anybody out, but my husband is a huge inspiration to me because it's him that I'm shaping my life with and creating that happiness. So yeah, definitely him. And also family in the broadest sense of the word. I feel so fortunate to be part of Scottish agriculture, the community that comes along with that, and the fact that having worked the length and breadth of Scotland, I can travel any distance in a car, and I know that I can go down a farm track, knock on somebody's door and have a cup of coffee. And the people that I have met along the way have inspired me massively. And yeah, I just feel really lucky to be part of this industry.
We're back to that common thread, Charlotte, of people.
Yeah.
Every time.
Every episode.
People. It's people. So, Alison, I think I'm feeling inspired already by this episode. I think you've got an incredible journey, but can you tell us a little bit about the journey to Crafty Maltsters and what Crafty Maltsters is for anyone who doesn't know, and what you do?
Of course. I'll start with the basics. We are probably 6th generation at least growing barley, and my husband and I are very passionate about the future of the industry, very passionate about the impact that farmers and what we grow can deliver in the wider food and drink supply chain and beyond. And I guess it's probably about nearly 10 years ago now, maybe more, when I was working with NFU Scotland. I was doing a supply chain project with Tennent's Lager, who were very keen to get closer to their barley growers and really bring that provenance through in the supply chain. And the more I looked at it, the more I realised how impossible that is, because like so many other aspects of the food and drink supply chain, we operate in that commodity marketplace. It's highly industrialised, and in many ways there's nothing wrong with that. That is the way in which we've developed. But there's a sweet spot, a special part there, that if you really want to bring through the essence, the importance, the value of what lies in Scottish produce, then you have to change your mindset and you have to do it in a different way. And that's when we started to realise that there was an opportunity for small scale malting, so that the burgeoning craft brewing, distilling industry that's so exciting is actually able to get what it wants, in the sense that it can say, I know where my barley, where my malt comes from. And more than that, what we were trying to say was, this barley has a value. It's not a standard product. It has the ability to change your end product if you let it. If you let the flavour come through, if you let the story come through, then there's a massive opportunity, and it's a really exciting one across the whole supply chain. So that was when we thought, this is worthy of further exploration. Let's find out whether we can do this. And there was quite a few challenges along the way, not least because nobody else was doing it in the UK, or sorry, one other farmer down in Haddington. Nobody else was doing it, so really nothing much to learn from. So we started looking at what was happening in America, and there was a growing craft malting scene there. So we learned a lot by looking across the pond. Equipment, really hard to do if not many people are actually doing it. Massive capital investment, huge risk, huge kind of leap of faith. So there was many things that were stacked up against us. And to be honest, when we told people about what we were thinking of doing, the common, or almost exclusively, the answer was, you are totally nuts. Don't even for a second imagine that you can compete against the big maltsters. What are you thinking? Don't be ridiculous. And our response to that was very much, well, that's not what we're trying to do. There's a place for everything. There's a place for large scale, of course there is. That's what the barley industry is built on in Scotland. But we're trying to do something different, very different. So it's not about competition. It's not about thinking we can get to that scale. It's about proving the worth of the barley in the supply chain and what we can do to bring that through.
It's an incredible kind of story of going like against the grain. Excuse the very bad pun, but and like carving a different path against lots of people saying, no, we have to stick to the status quo. Let's just do things the way they've always been done. And I think there's lots of kind of stories like that across Scottish agriculture, and I'm sure Charlotte and I will share from others over the course of our podcast, but not just this episode. But I think it's really encouraging that Alison, you and Dan had the strength to kind of just be like, no, we know that there's space for this in the market. We know that we're not going head to head with the big maltsters, and we really believe that there's a place for this, and that you've kind of carved that path. And how's it going today? Because that's like, as you said, like 10-ish years ago you started that journey. How's it going today?
So the actual malting business didn't launch until 2019. So it took us a very long time to iron out all of those challenges and get to a point where we thought we are comfortable to take that leap of faith. And comfortable is probably not the right word, because I think as well as having the strength and quite probably the resilience that so many farming families have, there was also a little tiny bit of naivety in there, which I think was a good thing. If we hadn't had that, then we probably would have thought twice. So this in June will be our 4th year, and we've had a lot of challenge, not least the equipment coming across in bits. It's big, it's large scale processing equipment. So we had to build that. We had no malting training. We had no idea how to malt. We had to learn, and we had to learn quickly. And we had to also step back and say we're going to be brave enough to learn it our way. There's lots of people in the malting industry. There's lots of people that could have told us the basics of how to malt, but we weren't doing that on a large scale. We were doing it on a small scale. We were trying to do something different. So there was a large element of saying, we're going to have to do this our way. So that was challenging. And I think Dan is absolutely the master maltster and all of that. It came intuitively to him. And yeah, I'm kind of in awe of what he has been able to achieve in that sense. We had COVID. We've had various things from a brewing and distilling perspective that have influenced our customer base. We've seen brewers come and go. We work a lot with the distilling industry now, which in many ways is able to absorb a lot of these challenges in a different way, so they're a bit more steady. But our processing equipment is a 4-ton system. That's what it's billed as. The reality is that's not what it actually does. The malting process, everybody told us, would take 7 days. The reality is it actually takes 10, sometimes 11 days. So all of those different factors have had a big influence on the output and the sales that we can actually achieve, which has meant that the business model we projected is very different from the one that we have in reality, which is definitely challenging. And I think if Dan and I, which we don't often do, take a step back, remove ourselves from those challenges and say, well, what have you actually achieved? That's a really important thing to do. And I was telling Charlotte, I did a home brewing podcast last night, and they were asking me loads of questions about Crafty Maltsters and everything we did, and they were just so enthusiastic about what we'd achieved. And saying your malt, the quality is second to none, it's amazing, it makes fantastic beers. And it's really important for us to take that step back and say, in a small way, in a medium way, whatever it is, we've changed things, we've demonstrated it can be done, we've proven the value of the barley, the farmer, the flavour, and that's really satisfying.
Alison, I think that's absolutely fantastic reflection on the power of celebrating our own success. We definitely, none of us do that enough, and it's so easy just to get caught up in the day-to-day and to not stop and think, oh, actually, what we did was quite good there. So congratulations on taking that time to celebrate success. Moving on, are there any other experiences you would like to share with our listeners?
I started my career with a real strength of feeling around the potential of Scottish agriculture, the value of the people, the families, the land, everything that comes along with that, and the fact that through my eyes it possibly wasn't being capitalised on enough or valued enough. So when I started my role with NFU Scotland, I did so with an absolute belief that I know where I'm going. I'm going to a point where I can be influential enough to change that, and to showcase, similarly with Crafty Maltsters, to showcase the value of the people and the products. For me, that's what it was about. And I knew pretty early on that in order to do that would require fundamentally an ability to listen, because the value that I picked up from people along the way was the most important thing. I had to listen. because it wasn't about what I thought was the right thing. It was about what the industry and the people that make it up thought, and really understanding that. And the other massive factor was patience. Patience, patience, and patience. And for me, you know, I hear a lot that there's an unwillingness to change in the farming industry. That isn't my experience. My experience is that the people that I come across see a value in what they're doing. Somebody else looking at it might think that they should be doing it in a different way, but unless you get under the skin of that business and really understand the motivation of the people behind it, how on earth can you say that they need to or should change? For some people it might be absolutely about profitability. For other people it might be environment. For some it might be community. So unless you understand those things, I don't believe that we're in a position to tell people that they have to change in the swathing way in which we tell Scottish agriculture that it has to change. And I never, in all of the things that I did with NFU Scotland, and there was quite a few different projects that I launched. So I did a project in Orkney and Shetland called Farming for the Future, where it was about peer-to-peer learning, because we were often in this model where we get in experts to tell our members, our farmers, what they should be doing. And my feeling was that knowledge, that passion exists in the industry. And yes, you have to have people to facilitate that. Yes, you know, there are people with areas of expertise that we can learn from, but bring all that together and you've got something pretty special. And that's how you create the change that you want to see. So at the beginning, people said, it's not going to work. You're not going to get people coming out. They won't be interested. It ended up, I think, something like 40% of all the farmers in Orkney took part in the programme. The buzz, hearing people say that might have only lived like 20 miles apart, oh God, I haven't seen you for 5 years. That kind of thing was just such a great feeling. And the team that we had built up to deliver it all, I think we ended up doing about 25 different events on farm, and we took it to the Highlands, to Shetland, to Aberdeen, and never in that time did I ever get a sense from the industry that there wasn't that willingness to change. It was more in the hierarchical structure that sits above that. And I don't mean in NFUS as an organisation, I mean across the board, whether that's from, right the way down from government through to, we have hundreds of stakeholder organisations that support the industry. And really, what I felt was that there's a confusion in that for people, and somehow it doesn't always let the industry shine through.
I think it's absolutely brilliant, Alison, the starting of that visiting each other, because we're seeing it everywhere across the board. Scottish Agritourism are doing it, other organisations, and now we're seeing a real kind of desire to learn from each other, to see what each other's doing, to step away from being so busy just doing, and to go and see what other people are doing. But there is so much opportunity for that in this current market, and I think that's brilliant and fantastic that you had such great engagement early on in Orkney and in the Highlands with that kind of opportunity. And I know I really enjoy going to see what other businesses across the rural sector are doing, and I know I'm not alone in that. And I know that from our rural leadership journey, there's people there talking about, oh, can you come and see what I'm doing, so that we can share knowledge and experience and learn from each other. And I think is so powerful.
Yeah, and I think that kind of hits the nail on the head. That's so busy just doing, and many farms are really, really tight, from a labour perspective, and they just simply don't have that time to get off, and also there's so many things, so many events to choose from. How do you begin to say that's the one that, if I've got 3 hours in my week to spare, that's the one I'm going to go to? And it's just the network, understanding from other people what's valuable, what's good, and it goes back to what I said at the beginning. We're a massive family.
It's interesting the public perception of Scottish farming, because time and time again, we're hearing stories of how farmers have adapted to overcome challenges. And there's obviously this big question mark at the moment around future sustainability of Scottish farming, and what that's going to look like, the importance of diversification in sustainability. And I think just going back to the Crafty Maltsters example, I mean, that's a great example of how diversifying your business can help you become more sustainable in the future.
Definitely. I don't like the word diversification, because and it's so commonplace that everybody uses it, but I prefer to say added value, because I think what Dan and I were very clear about before we went down any other route was the farm business is the core. Unless you have that right, unless you recognize that you can't do anything else without that foundation, it is what has provided us for generations with what we've got. We simply want to add value to that, and we want to work with what we've got, add value, and showcase that to, whether it, in our case, the brewing and distilling industry, but it's equally applicable in every agri supply chain, whether it's beef or soft fruit or whatever it might be. So yeah, adding value is, I think, really, really important. Finding the route to do it is the challenging part.
And then I suppose just looking at your children's future and the legacy that you're leaving for them, are they quite active on the farm and things?
Not massively. Not massively. They have an interest, and I think sometimes when you're growing up, I know certainly in my case, you take it for granted a bit, because it is the environment in which you grow up, and you don't realize that the swathes of space, the excitement, to us it's quite commonplace, and it's only actually when you're a bit older and you leave and you think, oh, I'm hankering after that again. That's my life. That's where I want to be. So I think it can be difficult from that point of view. I mean, Max, my eldest son, he's got his sheep, and they do muck in a bit, but maybe not as much as Dan would like. Tractor driving age is certainly going to be useful, but I think in terms of the legacy bit, we talk a lot about legacy, and that's what drives us in our business. And it's true, because we've been lucky enough to be handed over a business and to grow that business. But as well as legacy, what is equally important is the happiness, the fulfillment for us in this generation, because it's utterly pointless knocking your pan in, day out, to get to a point to hand over that legacy of things, and assets. For me, the biggest legacy will be in the people, in my children. If I can look at them and say, in part I have influenced their path, who they are as people, their kindness, their responsibility, all these different things. For me, that's the most important legacy. And to be quite honest, I really want to enjoy my time right now. I'm not looking to retirement to do that. I want to have fun now.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial. I think agriculture is very much a vocation, as well as being a job, if you like. But if you love what you do, if you're truly passionate about what you do, which you clearly are, Alison, then it doesn't feel like work sometimes.
It doesn't. I think one of the most difficult things is to find the balance in all of that, because it's easy to take on too much and impossible then to keep that element of life, of fun, of doing other things that you enjoy. And it's been a long journey for me to find that balance and to say no, to say I'm sorry, I don't have time to do that. I'd love to be able to help you. I'd love to be involved, but my non-negotiables, it's going to compromise them, and I will not miss sports day. I will not miss parents' evening. I will be here most of the time when my children come in from school, and I'm sorry, but that's, for me, I'm not compromising on that.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Alison, was about confidence, because you have achieved so much in your career, in your life and everything. How have you found your confidence develop over that time?
Firstly, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say that. I think, like many people, confidence is absolutely a thing that develops over time, and it comes when you find peace with yourself, that you don't have to prove anything, that what you bring to the table is of value, and that your opinion matters. And I still have imposter syndrome. You know, I'm involved in a couple of projects that sometimes I think, I don't know how anybody thinks I know what I'm talking about. But I'll have people go, yes, yeah, I agree, and I'm like, okay, that's good, because I thought I was talking crap. So I think everybody has a crisis of confidence at some point, and I suppose for me, I am innately a very resilient person. I will go tooth and nail, but with a smile on my face, in the nicest possible way, to get what I believe is the outcome that needs to be there. So the patience, the resilience, that comes quite naturally to me. And although I might have had difficult times in life, I've never stopped believing that the point of happiness or achievement that I wanted to get to was out of my reach. I always believed it was there. I think actually the biggest boost to my confidence probably comes not from saying, I can keep going, I can do this. It's from stopping to say, something's not quite right. I'm challenged, I'm hurting, I'm sad, I'm whatever I am. Stopping to say, there's vulnerabilities here, and to the outside world, I look absolutely fine, and I'm fighting on, and I'm doing this, and I'm achieving that. But if behind all of that, it's not quite right, you're never going to have that level of confidence that makes you happy. And I think the biggest thing for me was stopping and saying, I need to sort those things out before I can actually genuinely feel confident that I've done what I wanted to do, or I'm on a journey that I want to be on.
I think that's really powerful, Alison, what you've just said about vulnerabilities and confidence coming from being able to stop and face the challenges as well. The question we end asking all our guests, so it's time for you, is what's one piece of advice you would give to the next generation of women in rural Scotland?
I think probably what I just finished up on there around vulnerabilities. And I think one of the things for me that really hit that, I think I was reading a book or reading an article or something, and that quote, which you've maybe seen before, don't cover up the cracks because that's where the light comes through, was let people know what your vulnerabilities are. Let people know that you're unhappy or that you're worried about something, and address it. And I think honesty, authenticity, you had said before this podcast that a couple of the questions that you're going to ask me, and one of them was around the challenges. And I think in my head I had a pretty stock answer for what I might say. And I thought, well, that's not what this podcast is about. This podcast is about honesty. It's about vulnerability and saying, we all have those moments. So I think the most important thing I would say to people is do not be afraid of letting the vulnerability shine through, being honest and being you, because let's face it, you can't be anybody else. All those things are taken. I think you're both incredibly inspiring, and everything that you've done, whether it's in relation to this podcast or in your careers, I feel very fortunate to have met you, very fortunate to be part of this, and yeah, it's great. Huge well done.
We really appreciate that, Alison. It means a lot, and thank you for all of your help and support. It has honestly been absolutely invaluable. So that's a wrap on episode 5. Alison, thank you so much for joining us today to share your stories, experiences and lessons.
Thank you very much.
If you would like to connect with Alison on social media, you will find her details in the show notes.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram at Women in Wellies Podcast to stay up to date with all the latest news.
And you can email us with any questions on womeninwelliespodcast@gmail.com, and we'd love it if you could leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Until next time.